It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I'm the guy they call Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday. It's nice to be back. We had like a 2-week break. We don't usually do that, but we're kind of restructuring the way we do the shows. Plus, we had a lot going on over the last few weeks, so it made sense just for us to take a little bit of break and come right back into it. I need to change that opening. I think I'm well past 10,000 students. It's got to be close to 20 or 25,000. So, it's funny, we put the intros in there and we go for them strong. And next thing we know, it's been 3 years. So, which is great because we love doing the show. We love doing it consistently because of the content that we give to everyone out there. And today's going to be a great one too. It's funny. Today's not it's not one of those where you're like, oh, this is so exciting. This is like the most exciting information we're going to do. And if you looked at the subject about just entering into the MLS, you'd be like, oh, great. But a lot of it's not so much the MLS input that we're talking about today as much as it is the concepts of what's happening when we put them in. So the topic sounds boring, but the actual information is pretty good. And it kind of gels a lot of the topics together that you go through quite a bit. So we love doing that. We're probably going to have to break it into 2 shows because it takes a long time to go through the input. So we're definitely probably going to take 2 shows for that. Everything going on out there couldn't be any more political. Has to be the most tumultuous, like last 2 weeks political that it gets. I mean, you've got just COVID 50-50 on how it goes, what to do, what not to do. Should you have a mask on? Should you not? Should you have gotten vaccinated? I mean, it's all across the boards. And I don't even know what people think is the right answer anymore. I know what the right answer is, but I don't share it because I don't like the other half of the people yelling at me. One thing we teach our agents quite a bit, and we share it with a lot of people, if we make political comments and uneasy comments, 50% of the people that use us love them, but the other 50% hate it. And I always tell them we're not in the business of pissing people off. So those are usually topics that we kind of stay clear from. I'll address them. I'll put them out because they affect us. There's no doubt COVID affects us, real estate wise too, but it's not something I lean on one way or the other. And then Afghanistan too. I mean, a whole nother world of mess created. It's almost like it gave COVID a break of breathing so we could complain about that, and everybody could give their opinions on whether we should be there, whether we should not be there, making fun of someone not doing something competent. Sometimes you wonder whether everybody has enough to do on their own.
I'm going to buy Airbnbs in Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, yeah.
Values are low right now.
Mountainous views in there, but say what you want about it, but yeah, it's interesting the moment that we take our stuff out, and that has nothing to do whether you believe whether we should have or we should not take them out. It's just funny when we do take them out. That's what happens. It's kind of it's almost like they're waiting for us to leave. And then there's so many countries that wonder why we're there. I'm like, oh, there you go.
Well, they've got that old proverb. The Americans have the watches. We have the time. That's kind of their proverb they use over there.
It's true. It's true. And but it creates problems. It creates worry. Those types of issues affect the financial systems, and the financial systems affect real estate, which is why we discuss them and we bring them up. Now, those are 2 things this week that are bearing down on what it is we do. There is no doubt that the second wave of COVID is a very big surprise. I don't think anybody viewed it like this. I think everybody knew it was going to stay around, but I don't think they were aware of the power of the second strand and what it could possibly do. And it really does look like it's attaching to people, the ones that did not get vaccinated. It really does look like it's. I saw a show the other day that it said, if you hadn't been vaccinated, you're just sitting duck to it. And it doesn't matter whether you did or you not. Everybody has their reasons for whether they vaccinate or not. And some people have allergy issues, whatever. But I can tell you the ones that it's tough sometimes, because if you didn't, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but it means you certainly seem to be getting a better chance of catching it. And that's been hard for a lot of people. And a lot of the ones that I know, it's been harder. Even the ones that had it before said this batch was harder. Then you have some that say it didn't do anything. So it's different for everybody. But the real concern for us is how it comes back in. Well, it's twofold for us. Does the economy take another setback because of it? You're already seeing some businesses going back to what we did last year and being more strict with mask, spacious places, and that causes some people not to go in. It causes the restaurants to lose some of their customers in, which, God forbid, they were just getting back on their feet. So there's some trouble there. And that feeds into how we do housing. So we're kind of watching that hesitantly. I don't think anything takes the housing market, the robust housing market, down, but it certainly can probably give it a shot. Sickly, it probably works timing-wise, because it probably needs to come down a little bit. And we are starting to see signs of a stabilizing market, at least in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio areas. We are starting to see a little bit of a pause. Some people have been asking me, I get that question about 50 times a week, and I've been asked why do I believe that? I go, well, it's not a belief. It's in the contracts we review. We have a large team, and for the first time in 2 years, a lot of those contracts are coming back. They're not above offer price or contract price, and they're not. There's not multiple offers going through that, and that's not by coincidence. That means that the market is slowing down, and some people are just like, I'm just not going to pay that. So we are starting to see a little bit of a stall. In a very good way. It needs to stall. There's not a real estate agent on the planet that thinks this is a great market. None of us like this market. It's unjustified. It's unweighted. It's unfair. It's completely biased towards one side, and that's not how we ever want anything. So, oddly enough, some of the world events might actually help the real estate market return to some stability. The timing's right too, because we're entering the fall season where the kids are back in school, and most people who were making a decision probably did. Now that historically always is a low point, but combined with the robust market, it really has been a concern the last couple of years. But I think this time around, it's probably going to start. Because this is a real estate show, I think one of the more difficult things, and we're going to have a lot of takeaways today and next week, but I'm going to tell you right now, one of the biggest takeaways with how all this stuff is going to fall through is how we conduct the business that we're doing on a day-to-day basis with the systems that we have in place, with the economy we have in place, with the processes we have in place. Do we continue to move the exact same way? And the problem with that is when you start adjusting offer prices, when you start saying, well, I had to be 40 or 50,000 over for the past 5 months, 6 months, whatever, because the market was so crazy. Well, when do I back off of that? When do I say it's not 50K over, but I lose it because I didn't do it? But what if I went 50K over and I didn't have to?
Yeah.
And I will tell you, 21 years into it, that's the hardest it's ever been for me. There's a good chance I can miss. Just because of the area or the timing. It's very difficult. And this is not the process that we want to be in. Very difficult for an experienced agent, and it's just a nightmare for a new agent. And for all the new agents we have that watch, now's the time that if you're not going through some type of senior management or some type of mentor to help you, you better. There's probably one time in the real estate industry that an agent who truly isn't trying to do harm, they're really trying to do their job, could literally cause a lot of problems. So that's
it really is the transition periods that are the worst. When it's going from a hot to a balanced market or the other way, you got issues with appraisals, you got issues with what you offer. And like you said, there's a whole new generation of agents that jumped in when this market was crazy, and they're going to think that the norm moving forward is for buyers to pay title and, just different ways of doing it, thousand earnest. And they're going to have to be corrected that, hey, that's not how it works historically.
It's a terrible trickle-down effect combined with exactly what you just said, that we are in a historic period where about 3 or 4 years worth of agents don't have a clue as to how the actual real estate market works from the negotiation side too. And it's going to be very painful as they start adjusting, because it's hard to go backwards and relearn something you thought you already learned. So I think that's going to be tough for everyone. Those of you new to the show, those who catch on or watch from somebody else, I'm Robert Mesh. I'm the owner of the SWR Group. We're one of the largest groups in the Keller Williams Kingdom. We don't just cater to Keller Williams, though. This show's for every real estate brokerage out there. That's my buddy over there, Brent Holberg. He pretty much does run SWR. He's the probably the face, which is a better face, and he's the guy that does the work that needs to be done. And he's super sharp on the real estate side. And I don't think anybody can do a real estate, a radio show, podcast, whatever, for 3 years if they don't have someone who's competent on the other side that can pick up the piece that you miss. So always good to have him. I couldn't do it without him. And actually, it's become almost just expected that he's right there next to me.
It is expected. It's actually mandatory. It's in my job description.
He wouldn't do it if he didn't want to. He'd bitch about it, and he wouldn't be on the show. So we're going to talk about how we enter the MLS. We spend a lot of time with meeting clients, buyers, sellers, talking to you about how you do your listing appointments, your listing presentations, and we do all that stuff, but we don't talk as much about, well, once you do, what do we do now? And we're going to do the what you do now today. This is the one where you're finally got the best news in your real estate career, that someone finally is going to go with you, and you're going to put the listing up, and you got all the other stuff to sign, all that stuff done. But now you have to sit in front of the computer, the laptop, and input the listing. Now, for some people,
you did that, Mr. Robert?
What's that?
When was the last time you did that?
I can still do it.
I know you can.
It's funny, if you don't do it enough, you do forget certain things, and it gets kind of embarrassing if somebody asks you. So you do have to go through every once in a while and input the listing. So we're going to talk about that. You're going to find that it's not so straightforward. It's not just, you put this in this blank, you choose this one. This becomes a more analytical process than you think. Especially as we start getting into the description of the property, which is by far one of the heart and souls of entering into the MLS. Because believe it or not, Brent will tell you. And it's funny too. Brent is a very spoken, intelligent guy, but he does seem to not like having to grab the creative writing side.
Well,
of
especially if the house is amazing, it's not too bad. But if it's just a simple, basic house, like, what do I put? Well, it's a house. If there's nothing great to it, what do you put?
Keep talking about that for a second.
Yeah,
I gotta move on to this.
It's like, okay, let's just take a standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's, just in a normal neighborhood, nothing real great about it. It has some damage, needs a little bit of work, basic upgrades. And that's where I struggle. Like, what do I put in this? Like, so I usually have my go-tos, great for entertaining and plenty of natural light. Like that, those are my two things. And then it just depends, right? I'm terrible.
Brent's padding his resume for luxury listings and going above and beyond to be different and creative.
Yep.
He did say something that's going to be a discussion today or next week, and it refers to some of the common phrases that we use that we take from others or that we've been taught from others. And sometimes the run-of-the-mill listing, we will do that, but then there are going to be listings that we can't do that with, that we're going to have to be more specific. We very well might have listings where the owner flat out tells us, this is what you're going to put.
Yep.
Which I actually don't mind, as long as they don't do
like
anything ridiculous. That's fine. The common problem with an owner drafting the description and for a new agent, and they all do it, they're way too long. Everybody wants to talk about how great their house is. The MLS only lets you have about 7 or 8 sentences, and after that, they're like, that's enough. They can see it for themselves. So when you first do it, you put this huge draft, and then, which the MLS really should stop. It doesn't do it. It should stop you. If you're paying attention, the red things come up, but it should stop you. And, you go on for another hour and it says, oh, I'm sorry, you have to delete all this. So
I've never had that problem. I'll just tell you
that. Yeah. Your 2 or 3 sentences don't get to the absolute max there. So, but it's again, it's exactly the point we're making. It's a takeaway from the show. You think this is just a fill in the blank, and the descriptions are far from the fill in the blank. In fact, I would argue that the description is one of the few things that I still spend a lot of time on. That's the one thing I won't do a quick answer on. If an agent calls and they ask me, even I say, hey, let me think about it. And then I look at the property, because you have to every word matters in the description.
Especially lately when I've texted you, I'm like, hey, do you want to help me with this? Is there anything special you want to put in this description? And you respond, no. So that's very helpful when I struggle already. It's
because I'm relying that I know you have the creativity to put something in there.
I don't.
So we're going to talk a lot about that too, but it really is the setting point for that. It's not just fill in the blank. It's important. So let's start doing this. Let's talk. We're actually going to take you through every MLS system has a data input. Now, some of the really just anal agents that have been taught, someone tells them to actually print this form out, and they actually go to the house, and you don't have to do that, but you do have to be prepared to answer those questions, because that is what you're going to be inputting. So we're actually going through the input by order. We're actually going to go through it by order. So if you're taking notes, we literally are going just like you would be going through the MLS. So hopefully that's helpful to you as we go through this. Brent, do you want to go through the first few and just give some comments on when we go into the
So you were talking about like when we're walking through the house, the questions we're asking?
No, I was going to talk about. Do you have the data input sheet in front of you?
Well, yes, I do, Robert. Yes, I do.
I meant it seriously. I wasn't going to tell you to ask, because I was going to go off the.
Got it.
If you didn't have it, I was going to. Yeah, let's go off that for right now. Let's look at property.
Considering I didn't even know it existed until this morning, so that's good.
That's not true. I did know it existed. I just didn't.
No,
know
I didn't say
was.
you. I didn't.
Oh, so I knew it and you didn't.
Yep.
Let me jot that down.
Yeah, and I think too, guys, one thing to note before we completely get into this is it depends on how you search. If you're searching for a home and you're searching for specific things, you have to know a lot of agents don't input every single checkbox that's out there, right? So if you're looking for something that specifically has a media room, maybe they didn't call it a media room and you're not going to find it. So, I mean, it is good to fill out everything you can, but when you're doing the search side, keep it a little more vague, because not everyone inputs every box. So, some of the first questions it's going to ask, and they're easy ones, right? What type of property is it? Is it a condo? Is it a townhouse? Is it a, single detached? What type of listing do we have? It's an exclusive right to sell almost all the time. Is it for sale? Is it for lease? But it's weird that they do that, because, well, I guess it gives you the option if it's for sale, also for lease. And then, what always got me is style of house, right? Now, Robert's always taught me just click traditional, but if it's not right out there, like, oh, this is definitely Spanish looking or whatever, it's just, I think I leave that one blank if it allows me to, because I just don't want to put myself into a certain hole.
No, that's good. That's, I like the That's a great response on how we're the ones we're doing and the ones we expect to. Let me give a quick comment on some of the ones that he intentionally left out because he knows we don't use them, but just so you have a background understanding on why. Um, when it comes to listing type, it's rare you're going to use any of the reservations or the agency. It's literally, it's probably less than 0.0002% that we would ever use those. Those of you coming out of school, you should know what those are because you just learned about them. Funny, if you ask the veteran agents, you're like, I don't know what the hell they are. But yeah, you're almost always going to use that top one there. So that's something good to know. Now, on the lease MLS, one thing I will stress a little bit more than he did on it, you do have the capability of putting the house up for sale and lease at the same time. I don't suggest it because to me, it doesn't make sense. Common sense would dictate that if you put those both up on the same time, the lease is going to go a lot quicker.
Yep.
There's always more people that can want to lease than to buy. So anytime somebody asks me that, I'm like, well, are you sure you want to do that? Because we might as well just put it up for lease. Because now we're going through the trouble of doing both these listings, and the likelihood that it sells before it leases is low. So I've never understood that. But if you ever get asked that, that's a good takeaway from the show today, to tell them, well, I can do it, but it's obviously going to lease quicker. I mean, so do you really want to go through the trouble of putting it up for sale at the same time? So that's something a lot of people see. It's funny on the housing, most of the houses, just like Brent said, we're typically dealing with condos or single detached. Not as many of us are looking at resort properties. Some of us do the manufacturer, but there's a lot of wild things in the housing types. Most of the time it's going to be single detached. And same thing with style of house. He's right. And I do teach people that you should put traditional because traditional is the most general. And unless you have a background in architecture, it's really hard for you to say what type of house it is. There's very few people that have the knowledge to say, oh yeah, well that's a mid-century modern. You know, that's not common conversation in there. And as sharp as he always is, sometimes what you'll see is if we know it's obvious that it has a Spanish detail to it, or that it's a huge one-story plot. Sometimes we'll put ranch house on that because it technically is a ranch house. A ranch a lot of times is defined as a one-story, but it's not technically just one story. So we're pretty general in there. All right, Slick, keep going. You're doing great. You do more, start with that construction status and keep going with that.
Yeah, so construction status, like what is it? Is it a new construction? You know, that it's already done, like a inventory home that's finished? Is it still being built? That would be incomplete. Is it pre-owned? Or proposed, meaning that they have not even started building it yet. And then I don't think I've ever used unknown on there. Type of construction, and that's one that a lot of times I have to go back and look at the pictures I took of the house to see, because they want to know what's it made out of, right? So it's usually in Texas, it's going to be brick, stone, and maybe some siding. And those are the usual ones for us around here. And then we'll subdivide, right? So that's usually if you have a much bigger lot and they want to know if you'd be willing to split it up into other lots. And almost 99% of the time it's no, we'll not subdivide that. Want to keep going?
No, yeah, you're good. Sorry. A lot of times on the subdivide, it depends where you're at. If you're in the city, in the suburbs, the metroplexes, like most of us are, he's right. You start getting down to rural areas, that becomes a much more important conversation. Are we going to subdivide? Are we not? Does the city allow it? Does the county allow it? There's a lot of entities you have to go through, and that becomes a more driven expertise, which is why a lot of times we tell you, well, not a lot of times, we tell you all the time to practice inside your competency. That's where we start getting careful, because rural property might be a little different depending on what you're doing with it. He mentioned on the construction status, it's almost always pre-owned, but be careful there. Some of you start using your own opinion. Some of you think that if it's a new house, only 2 years, that it's still a new house. Like, no. That's why they put, is it pre-owned or not? I mean, is it pre-owned? Pre-owned does mean that someone else owned it. The builder owned it, and it's not new anymore. Okay, it's not new construction. I've seen some people who 10 years later call it new construction because that's how it was originally built. Like, that's not what that means. That's not And y'all can remember, it's easy for us to do these types of shows with the content because we see this all the time. This isn't just me and Brent that do this. This is me, Brent, about 140 others that do it. And not only that, a lot of the people that we talk to and train inside the other offices that we're a part of, we see this all the time. So whereas Brent laughs, he sometimes forgets that that's happening, but it does. You have someone that puts it, you're like, that's not at all what that means. In fact, you can get in a lot of trouble by claiming it is. He made an interesting comment on the type of construction, and I liked it because it was genuine and honest, where he goes back and he looks at it. Sometimes there is some strategy with the way you mention which type of construction it is, because brick is obviously more favorable, especially in the state of Texas, because of the humidity we have. That's why you don't see, or you don't really prefer, no offense to anybody who has one, a stucco home. Stucco homes are not the best way to build in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We probably have lots of clients. Why the hell just tell me one then? I'm like,
But it looks great.
Hold on for a second.
Yeah.
The ones that are built, they do take extra precautions here in Texas because of the humidity.
Yeah, there's a different type of there's a different material too than stucco they use now.
Yes. But you know what I'm talking about, the face of it. So brick is very prone, and a lot of people don't know, a lot of the brick in the entire country is built in the midsections just north of us in the Oklahoma, Kansas area. A lot of the most prominent companies like Acme, they're stationed there, so it's easy to get the product into the people in the state of Texas. So they're going to want brick. Sometimes you'll have, well, a lot of times you'll have a house that really is brick, but it has a little bit of siding. And that's where people start. And this is an opinion. I'm going to give an opinion here. There's people that would differ with me on this. But if I have a house that's majority brick and it has maybe the chimney as siding, I'm not putting siding. Because siding, sometimes people think that the house was less expensive because they use siding instead of brick. And I don't want that to be the opinion of the property, even if it's one of the sides that has it, just a little bit of the side. If it's primarily brick, I'm going to put primary brick. And if it's primary siding, I'm going to put siding. I don't like checking both if one is just a small.
I learned something today.
Well, that's something you don't do, right?
I'll check everything right? That's on it just to.
Well, and hypocritically, you did right, because that means I taught you that way to do it. That's what
but who really looks at that at the MLS and goes, "Oh, the box is checked for siding. I'm going to offer less."
The agents don't, but there are plenty of clients that do. You'll have a lot of clients in the descriptions. They'll look to see if it's a brick home versus a siding home. It does happen. So,
even with pictures.
Yes, because a lot of houses.
Oh, you can't see the sides. Even
some of the inexpensive houses, they will brick the front, but they'll have complete siding in the back.
Yep.
So a lot of people might not like that, and some do. So that's good. I'm glad, and that's the great. Brent says, actually, he does a lot more than I do. He'll say something that I didn't know. I was like, wow, and that's why we talk through these things, and honestly, that's why we do a lot of. We like to teach a lot of the subject too, because believe it or not, teaching these types of subjects is what helps you learn them. Because over time you hear so much and you hear someone, well, that's not how that is. And after a while, you've heard so many people that you're the one that's like, that's not how that is, which I'm usually the one that's not how that is. But I love it how he looked at that, and he has no shame in saying, I didn't know to do that. It doesn't mean he's wrong. He's probably doing it more right than I am.
Let's get yelled at later.
No. In fact, I think over the years I changed it. I think over the years I said, there's no reason to put that if that's really not what it is. So a little bit of opinion there. You do what your broker tells you to do, but I think the common sense that we use there would support it. Here, I'll do a few of these for you, Brent. Senior community, we have, every Metroplex has dedicated senior communities. These are ones that actually proclaim you have to be at least age of like 45 or 50, and you cannot live in the neighborhood. Also, and this is another subject that we don't talk as much about, and we should, It's also one of the few areas in housing that someone can prohibit kids from living in. Children are protected under the Fair Housing Act, under the family status section, but there's a pro bono effect in the Fair Housing Agreement that says that you don't, that a senior citizen community can actually prevent a child from living in.
You got about 5 more years till you're living the dream, buddy.
Yes, great. I cannot wait. It's funny, we always talk about it. Everybody talks about how your kids grow so fast, and you have so many people that are emotional. I always see something like, "Oh, I can't believe." I'm like, "I can't wait." Yes, great.
Get out.
Everybody always looks at me weird when I say that. I'm like, there's got to be more people like me out there that believe.
I'm here, and I got one on the way.
He's got one next week. He's got a long run.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's demoralizing, Brent. Hold on for a second. I just have to think about how much time you have.
I know.
That's so terrible. We all know we wouldn't do it if we didn't. If
Feel
we
obligated
didn't enjoy the run. Having kids is and having family is a roller coaster. Everybody has highs and lows, and that's what makes life worth living. The highs and lows. It's not worth living if it's high all the time. Yeah. A lot of people always want, and everybody's like, "Why are you off on the subject?" Because it's important. When we talk about stuff like that, a lot of the stuff I do is a lot of public speaking, a lot of motivational speaking, and sometimes if we're on a topic, that one's important to me because everybody always wants something they can't have, or they want, and the truth is, most people who get everything they want don't necessarily like it. Because it takes away all the stuff that they were ever hoping for. I mean, think about it. If you have every single thing at your fingertips, what is the next day to look forward to? Half the people are looking like, "You're an idiot. I want everything, and I want to be able to do whatever." If you really think about it, that's probably not the greatest thing to have. So it's funny when I joke with Brent about, thinking that he's got a long road ahead. That's what makes life worth living. And I think it's awesome and that y'all are about to experience that again. Okay, so let's talk about some of the core. Let's see where we're at here. We got 32. I want to try to do 45 today and 45 next week. So let's talk about the list price and move down, and we'll get into these other factors here. The first section does take a little bit longer because it's the most extensive. This is the areas that we actually had to analyze more and talk about more when you start talking about list price, list date, and all that type of stuff. Now, we could have a long conversation, but remember, we've already discussed how we got to the list price by now. In fact, we've done it in 3 or 4 classes already, in 3 or 4 shows already by the time we get here. So you've got your list price. You're finally ready to go with it. That's what's going in there. You're going to put your list date in there. The expiration date is typically, it's negotiable, but you can do anything from, or norm would be 60, no, I'm not sorry, 60. Normal, most people would say, is 90 days. It used to be 180, believe it or not. It used to be 6 months because the market historically took longer. And I think today most people would tell you that 3 months, anybody that puts a listing agreement longer than 3 months, someone might look at you. And here's the takeaway from that. If you're taught to put 6 months in the listing agreement, when you're talking to somebody that you're selling their house and you tell them you put that 6 months in the agreement, you're pretty much kind of making a statement that it might take that long. And I don't think that's the type of statement you want to make. I've always been of the opinion that you do the shorter time frame, and if you've done what you're supposed to, they wouldn't want to get rid of you anyways. And then when you get to that point, like, hey, we probably need to renew. Some people would argue with me on that. I always say anybody who argues with me on that is not very confident that they can hold the second agreement there. So that's a takeaway.
Luxury would be a different
for everyone. Yes, luxury, a great point. So that is a great point. Luxury's not, we are going to be longer on luxury. Luxury probably is standard of 6 months to a year. Probably, I think most luxury agents today probably do put a year, because even in a hot market, those houses are not viewed the same.
Yeah.
$2 million is $2 million in all markets. There's only a few pocketed people. So that's an excellent point. I didn't think about that as well. One point that we haven't made yet is, and I don't know how we did this because it's like the main point.
Where to pull the info from
now. So let's rewind this and act like this was the start, and then we'll merge back into this. Probably the most important part of this entire show was when you start entering the data in the MLS, you are going to want to autofill it from the tax scripts. You do not want to manually enter a lot of the data in this file. Specifically, you do not want to be the one who's manually entering the actual technical legal name of the subdivision. You do not want to be the one who's manually entering the area that it's in. And you certainly don't want to be the one who's manually entering in the square feet and all those other prominent points. The MLS is set up to where before you get to this, the first thing it asks you is, where do you want to get the information from? When you hit that autofill, it's literally doing half of this for you. So one, from a lazy perspective, you want to make sure you do it. But the real reason is you want the data that you know is already legally in there to be in there without you doing it. So I got to where it says year built. That's one of them. We don't have to enter what year it was built. And you should be thankful for that. That'd be pretty hard. I mean, what are we going to do? Ask a seller who is the fifth owner of the house? They're not going to know. So it's auto-populated in there. And that's why when I got to it, it made me stop. I'm like, well, we didn't talk about that. Maybe we should. Especially how it's the one that is probably the number one issue we have when we train somebody, that we go in there and we see that they did something. like, how'd you do that? And we catch on pretty quick. I'm like, you didn't follow directions. You didn't hit that autofill. And they're like, well, I didn't see that. I'm like, well, it's the first step, on there. Yeah. So we're hard on a lot of people with that, because you can really screw things up by not autofilling, which is really hypocritical of me that I actually missed it the way I brought it in there. So I'm almost glad I missed it, because it made us emphasize it more. Square feet. You talk about, actually it is. Square feet is the number one reason, or the misquote, or giving it an accurate square footage, is the number one reason an agent gets sued. The number one reason. This is the most important part of the show. From a takeaway standpoint, if you go off of the tax scrolls, which if you autofill, you are going off the tax scrolls, nobody can come back at you for the square footage being wrong, even if it is, because it's the government quote, it's the county quote of what they're taxing that dwelling at. Even if it's wrong, we cannot be in trouble. The second one, we can have an appraiser go in there, and a professional appraiser, and they can give us a measurement and we can use that. Whereas it's not perfect in court, it's pretty damn close. It's very hard to argue with the person who's an expert that they measured it and said it's different.
It takes liability away from us.
What's that?
It takes liability away from us as agents.
Yeah, a lot of liability. I wouldn't ever want to be the one who's answering for square footage. Now, the reason you might be asking, why would you go? Why are there alternatives? The tax scrolls are terribly inaccurate. They're terribly inaccurate. You have a lot of people that their square footage is terribly understated. And you have some that are overstated, although that's less common. You ask how that happens. Someone decides to put an add-on to their house. They close in their garage. They put a room above their attic. It becomes air-conditioned space, which is a key. And the city or the county wasn't aware of it because they didn't do a permit, which that happens a lot too. And when they go to sell their house, they have a 3,000 square foot house, but they're like, no, it's really 3,300. Now, this is an annoying part for y'all. When you enter it, like we just told you, off the tax scrolls, tax rolls will say it's 3,000. Well, 300 is a big difference. So the owner will bitch at you for it, but you kind of have to have the old hypocritical conversation of, well, you've been paying taxes on 3,000 square feet.
Exactly.
And now you're telling me that you want me to change it to 3,300 because obviously that benefits you. This is a classic. I want my cake and I want to eat it too.
I don't blame them.
No, I don't either. But, and everybody always laughs at me when I do this, but I still think I'm going to be the only one laughing at some point. I've always had a conspiracy theory that when you do that, if those municipalities that depend on those taxes, if they ever get to where they have a shortage or they're, almost where they're bankrupt and they have no more money, one of these days, someone who's smart there is going to say, I know damn good and well, half those people out there are not paying us the money they're supposed to pay. And it would not be hard for them to go in there and say, that house was listed at this square feet, but we've been taxing it here. He damn well took the money when he sold it, but he didn't want to take it when he taxed. So I always joke about conspiracy that one of these days, somebody's going to go in there and say that. For the record, most people would never, they would never say anything that they're tagged. Nobody's going to say, yes, charge me more. But it's an interesting conversation when someone brings it up from a legal standpoint. A very interesting conversation. You don't need to worry about the part.
Sometimes
actually,
you do.
Before we go to that, the square footage source. Notice it also says, and I've gotten so trained that I actually pretend no others exist because I don't want any others chosen. But on the MLS, it does allow you to choose whether it's the building plan you use. One of my favorites, other documentation, and then the owner. I don't think I've ever used any of those, nor will I ever use one of those.
That's always a red flag. When you look at a house.
How does the MLS still have it?
Yeah.
How does the MLS still allow the owner to state the square footage? That is just one of those questions that why would you do that?
Yep.
You know damn good and well, unless they're an appraiser, there is no way
they're
going to be able to quote it.
Technically, if that seller demands that you put that square footage that they said, and they're demanding that the tax records are wrong and they won't pay for an appraisal, technically, don't we have to put what they say?
Oh yeah.
So
we have to do what the owner says. Now, where the contradiction comes in, as long as it's not criminal activity, well, you could make the argument that it kind of is because we know that they're skewing the tax laws, but that's a good academic conversation as well. Does it dispute our ethics by us not pointing out, well, you really shouldn't do that? So very hypocritical. Don't ever put anything besides the tax or square footage. If anybody ever asks you, you better go to someone who's done it a lot longer than you, because there's a reason why that person's asking it, and they better have a damn good bit of documentation for us to say it. That is the number one lawsuit. Air and emissions insurance, almost the entire existence of it is for that. For that very cause, that someone goes back and finds out the house is 200 square feet smaller, and they say the agent should have told me, and they go just straight after us.
Shouldn't their own appraiser catch that?
Should, but very subjective the way those guys measure sometimes. Some of them just aren't perfect with it. Hey, Brent, how about we talk about, before we cut this show, because there's really no good place to cut this show. It really can go on. Hell, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's 3 episodes, but we won't do 3 in a row. Well, let's go ahead. We got our sponsor, Martin Cooley, back. Why don't we talk about him really quick, and then we'll kind of give a summary of today and move on to next week.
Yep. Good old Martin. Let me find my copy where I put that somewhere.
I told you specifically to have that.
See?
Why don't you listen?
Oh, well, if Mark puts the crawl up, then I can take care of it. So our sponsor today is Mr. Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. He is our go-to guy whenever we need our inspection needs handled. There are plenty of people that we offer to our clients, but Martin is the one that we love and prefer. he's always on time or early. All of his reports are color coded, so it's really easy for us to read in a rush. Red is for things that you really need to be concerned with. Blue are just minor things that you can just have looked at later. He's a guy that I would always recommend to my clients to use. I trust him. He's a great guy. You can reach him at 817-401-3240 or go to bpginspections.com and book with Martin Cooley.
And we have another sponsor. With our other one.
But I didn't get his ad copy this week.
Well, you know why I didn't say anything, because Martin took a month off, which he deserved. Well, actually, he didn't take it off. He still did his sponsors. I don't know why I'm saying that. I guess the public doesn't know. I'm just, for myself, reminding me that we hadn't done them in a couple of weeks. But if you want to go ahead and give
I
our
got it.
sponsors.
Because you had, we were off last week, and then you had George DiGianni the week before I wasn't on with you. So that's why I've been off for like a month.
So been a while. It's been a while since we have gone through it.
Yep. Our next sponsor is Greg Holdberg with Liberator Health Insurance, the best value in affordable health care. Join the Liberator revolution and take control of your health care. Customize your health care plan to fit your health care and budget needs. Use any doctor or hospital without a penalty, in or out of network. Teledoc is included in all plans, no deductibles and no copay. Their deal of the week: a school teacher was told to add her husband and 2 daughters to her plan offered by the school. Her premium would be over $1,000 per month. He got their family on a great plan for $485 a month. As an independent agency, Liberator is committed to transforming healthcare in Texas through innovative healthcare plans that are affordable and rich in benefits. For more information and to get a quick quote, call or text Greg Holdberg, independent health insurance broker, at 214-886-4688, or visit them at liberatorhealthinsurance.com. Boom.
Yeah, you know what I like about Greg is a good alternative. He's different. He's not like the mainstream. He gives a very different type of quote, and a lot of times in insurance, that's what you need. You need to see a different side of this, because some people don't need the Blue Cross Blue Shield full package and paying out the whatever, but some people need the dedicated insurance, and maybe they want to pay a different amount for what they're trying to do. And that's why I think Greg's great, because when you're shopping health insurance, you should look at a couple alternatives, because you might find one's a lot better than the other. So I always love him being a sponsor. Plus, he's a super guy as well. Okay, I want to wrap up for today. And
do you want to just go ahead and finish this first page real quick? Because we just had a couple things, and then we can move on to the next. Or
honestly,
I was thinking just multi-parcel and then the accessory unit.
Oh, I was going to say, okay, because I didn't want to go. Yeah. And I'll make quick comments on those too. And in fact, the only reason I wasn't even probably going to say it, because they're so lack of important, but I want to make sure that we say them anyways. The parcel ID, another one that you would never want to manually enter. You want to make sure it's right. So that comes off the tax scrolls as well. The additional parcel ID would be if there's multiple out there. Of course, if there's a multiple parcel ID, you would put yes there. It's funny, they have the additional parcel ID. That really should go into the multi-parcel as far as the way they enter it. Most of the time in the subdivision areas, you're always going to put there is no multiple parcel. And is there an accessory unit? Very rare that we see that.
Guest houses, stuff like that.
Yeah, very, very rare. So those are very simplistic. The other parts are extremely more important than that. But that's also a very good point. Some of you would be like, well, it took y'all, a whole show to go through one page. Again, it's one of the most important. When we see you next week, we're literally going to be going through some of the fields that go a lot quicker. So you're going to see how much quicker we go through. So those of you who are like, oh, I thought I was going to learn more. You learned a lot, but you'll actually see the presence of the actual entry next week. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Again, a show that probably doesn't have as much glamour, but probably more important than most of the shows we do, because this is what you're expected to do when you finally pick up a listing. And so many of the training classes for this type of material are so general in nature that it makes it difficult and, quite honestly, stressful when you get in there. So you're going to appreciate this session, and you're going to appreciate the next one just as much. As always, we appreciate everybody that's watching. We love the listeners that we have. We think it's great when you all forward it. We hear a lot of people talk about where they send them to somebody else. And quite honestly, we have a lot of people that watch just to find out who we are and get a feel for us. We have a lot of people who interview with us that cyberstock the show. So we're always welcome to that. We always love it too, because what you see is what you get. And this is exactly how it is all the time, whether you like it or not. So at least you got a good feel for what you're getting into if you ever decided to be with us. That's why Brent always has joinuswr.com on there. We do have a very descriptive website of what it is we do, very specific on what it is that we're doing. And we don't really push our stuff very often. I like the show to be general, but certainly not going to have my own show and not talk about the group that we run. So we always have a little bit of a plug in there. Y'all, thanks a lot. Y'all have a great week. Keep on plugging. Get back into the fall. Kids are back in school. Let's try to get back to some type of a normal schedule, if that even exists in today's world. We'll see you next week.